This is the Highly Sensitive Club, episode number 9. Have you been told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much? Do you have big feelings and deep thoughts you don't always know what to do with? I'm Stephanie Lynn, a certified life coach and highly sensitive person. I've helped dozens of highly sensitive clients feel more energized, more confident, and more in control of their high sensitivity. In these episodes, you'll get the information and inspiration to level up your life as a highly sensitive person too. Welcome to the Highly Sensitive Club. Hello, highly sensitive person. I am really excited to talk about today's topic because it is one that a lot of us highly sensitive people face. And of course, the topic is how to overcome perfectionism. This is the start of a series of episodes that I'm creating on how to overcome common challenges that most highly sensitive people, or HSPs, deal with. And our first episode on perfectionism is about what it is, how it's showing up, probably in sneaky ways, and how to work towards letting it go so that you can make progress in any area of your life and feel good while you're doing that. I have been decluttering lately. And this is funny because for 5 years, I was a decluttering expert and I closed my successful business to go into coaching because I just love having these conversations and sharing this information with others. So sometimes my comfort is still going back and decluttering things. Anytime I feel stuck, I know I need to go and I need to clear something out, whether it's physical, whether it's in my schedule, or whether it's mental. So recently, I've been doing a lot of steady decluttering. And the first way is in physical clutter. I don't have very much physical clutter, but the clutter that I was keeping was related to course materials or webinar handouts or notes regarding things. I tend to hoard information, if anything else, even though I'm not into a lot of stuff. So I recently decluttered a number of unfinished handouts or workbooks and things, trusting that something is going to come back to me when it needs to. I have also been doing some scheduling decluttering, which has been hard in some instances because I've been realigning my schedule with my current season, where I am growing my business, what I'm doing in my personal life. And I had some engagements that I had made years ago, like 3 and 4 years ago or longer. And I realized that they just weren't working the same way. I wasn't showing up to them the same way. So I've been decluttering my schedule of anything where I'm not bringing my full light to it. And most importantly, I've been doing a lot of mental decluttering lately. And that is figuring out all of the old expectations or thoughts or feelings that aren't serving me. And this work never ends. There's never a point where you've suddenly cleaned up all of your thoughts and you're never going to think a negative or uncomfortable or unhelpful thought again. No, that's not how brains work. So even when you get to the point that you're thriving with your sensitivity and you're pretty comfortable with things, there's always something that you can keep improving and learning about yourself. So I realized, which is why I wanted to share this topic today, that my version of perfectionism actually shows up as completionism. Completion meaning 100% it's done, whether that's an online course, whether that's a certification program, whether that's notes that I'm taking for a client, or even video games. There are lots of ways to platinum on the platforms like PlayStation and Xbox. So if you get a game on one of those platforms, you can get 100% by doing all this extra crazy stuff. And sometimes that's fun and sometimes it's a slog and I'm just treating it like an obligation. So I had this thought that I uncovered as I was doing this mental work. If I don't complete this 100%, whatever it is, I won't get the full value out of it. I'm missing something. What if I skip the exact thing I need? So there's a little bit of FOMO that was happening with these things. But what was really happening was I have exercises that I'm doing every day. And if I skipped a day, then I would put myself behind because I felt like, okay, well, I need to do today, but then I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to take care of these other things too. Is this ringing a bell for any of you? Are there things that you feel like you're keeping out of obligation because you want to have already done them, but you're not looking forward to the act of doing them? Whenever you have thoughts like this, if I don't complete this, I'm not going to get the value. I'm going to miss something. I'm going to skip the exact thing I need. You're going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it usually doesn't turn out the way you think it will. You skip actually the thing that you need that's right in front of you. That's not the thing you're pursuing. Or you're not getting the value out of it because you're not recognizing the value in it. Or you're missing something that's right in front of your face because you're still stuck in the past. So you do actually create these things. You just don't create them the way that you think you do. So I was looking into this, and I've never actually looked at the definition of perfectionism because it's such a common phrase. All of us kind of know what perfectionism is, but it is interesting to hear the definitions. So according to the Oxford Languages, perfectionism is a refusal to accept any standard short of perfection. As a philosophy, it's a doctrine holding that religious, moral, social, or political perfection is attainable. And essentially, the theory that human moral or spiritual perfection should be or has been attained. So that's interesting that we believe perfectionism is something that we can and should be doing. And the American Psychological Association describes perfectionism as the tendency to demand of others or of oneself an extremely high standard or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required by the situation. So that's the key phrase there. It's in excess of what's required by the situation. And we do that with ourselves and we do that with others too, which is usually how it gets us into trouble. Because how we define perfectionism is subjective to us. How you define perfect for you is going to be different from how someone else defines perfect for them. And I find too, especially with highly sensitive people, because we can have very high standards for ourselves, and that's not always a bad thing. But what happens when you start getting into the subjective area of perfection is you tend to move the goalposts. So you decide, this is what I want to do. And then as you start to do it, you start to tack on additional features and facets that are actually not necessary to complete the task and are probably going to slow you down. But you convince yourself, oh, I definitely need that because all these bells and whistles are going to make this so much better. And then I'm going to show up in this amazing way. I'm going to impress everyone. I'm going to feel great. So it's totally worth it to do all this extra stuff. Being extra, not a bad thing. Doing it when it doesn't serve you, something you want to let go of. So a lot of us have high standards and we are high achievers. If you're listening to this podcast, you are probably a growth-minded, highly sensitive person who has achieved a lot of things in your life. And unfortunately, what happens is sometimes we reach that high bar that we imagine for ourselves, and then we hold that as the standard for every single day, every single hour, no matter what the context of our life is and how our lives have changed. We still hold ourselves to that one moment when we did it exactly the way that we thought we should, or we surprised ourselves. And then suddenly that changes the standard for every single thing we do after that. In addition, you might also, as I said, move the goalposts or raise the bar. So as soon as you reach that high standard, suddenly it seems attainable. And you're like, well, I have to go for something harder now because that's even more important or more impressive or more exciting to me than reaching this already high standard. And what happens is perfectionism actually only serves perfectionism. Perfectionism doesn't often give us progress. It doesn't even really create much of a higher product or result than what we would have gotten otherwise, but it does serve itself because the more you go for perfect, the more you have to go for perfect because everything else seems substandard. Now, I have made this argument and I've heard clients make this argument too, that I'm not going for perfect. I'm just looking for the best option. So here are some sneaky ways that perfectionism might actually be showing up in your life. And you're not calling it that because you're like, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not going for perfection. That's impossible. There's no way you can be flawless. But, and whenever there's a but, there's always something interesting afterwards. I am going for the best option. I'm looking for the right answer. I know what is excellent for me. How can I do this optimally? What's the most efficient, productive, effective? Insert your adjective here. I want it to be complete. I haven't finished it. It's not 100%. See how those sneaky things can come in. And those are actually representations of perfectionism, that you believe that 100% is attainable all the time, 100% of the time. But in fact, it's not. And it's important for us as humans to recognize that our experience is almost never complete or finished or 100%. There's always going to be some nuance or some piece of it that doesn't turn out quite the way that we want, but that's often the time when the greatest creativity and the greatest ideas come out of what we've done. We actually want those moments when it doesn't go as expected, because then we can be open and see opportunities for new challenges and new creativity to continue to grow. So when we look for these versions, best, right, optimal, finished, we stop ourselves in our tracks. We become a self-fulfilling prophecy because we think that you have to plan for something or think of something perfectly ahead of time and then you can get started. But the problem is we don't define what perfect is. We create unrealistic expectations for us of what that actually means. And then we think if we have to get it perfect before we start, we never start because we've never decided what perfect is in the first place. So we stall ourselves and we still have this ideal of what the highest standard or the perfect standard is, but we never make any progress. So it doesn't serve us at all. Figuring out what the best option for you is something that you learn only by trying things and failing and then figuring out what works. The way to find your highest standard is actually to start testing it before it feels perfect or before you feel certain. And oftentimes that can feel uncomfortable. That's okay. It's okay to do things that are uncomfortable. It's okay to stretch yourself outside of what feels easy or what feels familiar, because that's how we learn and that's how we grow. So a lot of times we stop ourselves because we think it has to be a certain way. I have to know exactly what to do before I can take action. And it's the opposite. Taking action is actually what helps you figure out what to do as you go. Marie Forleo, I think, is the one that I heard who uses this great example. When you are riding a bike, you can't turn the bike when you're standing still. You're just going to fall over. It's a lot easier to turn the bike when you're already moving forward and you can make that graceful arc. And here's the kicker. What works in one season or situation may not work at other times or other circumstances or even with other people. So even if you do reach some high standard one particular time, as circumstances change, as you change, as things shift in your life, what is perfect at one time is not going to be perfect all other times. And it may not even be perfect again for that very same thing. It's a one-time event in the universe. And even if we do happen to hit it one time out of 100 or one time out of 1,000, we treat that as our new standard and we try to replicate it over and over again. And this gets us highly sensitive people into a lot of trouble. So here are 4 signs that you are falling prey to perfectionism. The first sign is procrastination or avoidance. Anytime you're like, I just am not ready to do that. I think I'm going to go do this other thing instead that feels easier. Maybe it's emails. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's doing a meditation and using that as your excuse to procrastinate instead of taking action and then finding other time to do meditation or journaling or things that you know are good for you and that you enjoy. But it's using things that you like and that fill you up in order to avoid doing something that makes you uncomfortable. That's when it really becomes procrastination and avoidance. So if it is doing anything else or even straight up avoiding, do you just brush your hands and say, I'm out, I'm done? I have definitely done that before. And it's something that I continue to catch myself when I have that inkling, like, I don't know how to do this. I'm not sure how this is going to go. I'm just going to put this down and I'm going to go take a break. Well, it probably isn't time to take a break because I have a break scheduled and it is not time to take a break. It's time to dig in, it's time to get uncomfortable, and it's time to figure it out. So if you're procrastinating or avoiding, this is probably a sign that you have some perfectionism going on and you feel like there's a high standard you're not able to meet, so you shouldn't even try. The second sign of perfectionism is busy work. This is any extra tasks that are not actually adding any value, moving the needle, or creating progress for you, but you're doing them because it helps you feel like you're making progress. So busy work could be answering emails. It could be writing a document or journaling about something or going over your website again for the 100th time, tweaking the language on something, those are not giving you great results and they're not helping you make progress, but they feel like you're completing something. So, busy work is a sign that you probably have too high of standards for something that you're going for, and you need to adjust it so that it actually serves you. It's a great thing to have high standards because it means that you produce very high quality work. But when it gets in your way and it stops you from actually taking action, there's something that needs to shift, and it's probably perfectionism. The third sign that you are falling prey to perfectionism is self judgment. And this could come in the form of guilt, it could be shame, but it's anything that you're telling yourself about how you didn't do it right, you don't do things right, you're wasting your time, and it starts to spiral and get worse and worse from there. You should be taking care of this. Why are you waiting so long? This is horrible. It's getting worse the longer you wait. You should just do it. The more shoulds you pile on top of yourself, the worse your self judgment is going to get, and the more you're going to weigh yourself down so you're less likely to take action. A lot of us think, and we've been taught, that to be disciplined means that you beat yourself up. When we beat ourselves up, we hide, we run, we flee because we're literally attacking ourselves. So when you're judging yourself, you're creating more stops and more pauses to the process. It's not helping. Number 4 is blaming outside circumstances. If you're falling prey to perfectionism and you're going, well, I just can't because I have too many other things on my plate, or this unexpected thing happened and I just don't have the time to do this right, that is probably an indication that there's some perfectionism going on, because you can take action and it can be a little bit incomplete and then you can come back to it. You can take a single step in the direction you want to go, and that helps you make progress, even if you have to pause, do something else, and come back to it later. A lot of times, those micro steps, those little baby steps in the right direction, are how real change actually happens instead of these big strides that we think we're supposed to make when we're feeling inspired and motivated. So anytime you start getting mad at other people for not following through on what you want, anytime you start to blame your circumstances or something you don't have, there's probably some perfectionism at play. Those 4 signals, again, are 1, procrastination and avoidance, 2, busy work, 3, self-judgment, which could be guilt or shame, and 4, blaming your outside circumstances for stuff that's happening internally with you. Here are some emotions that often arrive from perfectionism. Number 1, dread. You're just dreading doing something and you're not looking forward to it. There might also be a sense of obligation with this one. Number 2 is fear or anxiety. It could be anxiety about not doing it or failing it, but it could just as easily be anxiety about what success looks like and what that's going to mean on the other side. 3 is doubt. Doubt in yourself, doubt in the process, doubt in your decisions, doubt in anything that you're doing that is going to get in the way of you making progress. Doubt is one of the number one things that is going to slow you down and halt your progress when you are really trying to make moves in your life. So if there is doubt, that's probably coming from some perfectionism. Number 4 is confusion. Confusion happens because we want to do the best, we want to do it completely, we want to do the right thing, and we don't know what that is. Oftentimes because there isn't a best answer or a right answer or a complete answer. It's just trying something and seeing how it goes, because there is no wrong or right way to do it. A dear friend of mine, shout out to Pierre, offered me this thought: I am beyond right and wrong. What an interesting thought. I'm beyond right and wrong. So if you're having any confusion, it's probably coming from this place of believing that there's only one way that you're allowed to do something that's acceptable and you can't do anything else. Number 5 is resentment. This goes back to blaming other circumstances. When you start to feel resentful that things aren't going the way that you think they should be going, this is probably some perfectionism at play, because you have some expectations of the highest standard and the ideal of what's quote unquote supposed to happen. And when it doesn't happen, you get yourself all in a tizzy about it. I can particularly relate to this one because I've been finding myself getting into this mode lately and realizing, oh, there's my old pattern again. No problem. I don't have to feel that way. I can choose to think different thoughts that are going to help me feel differently. But if you are feeling resentment consistently, there might be some perfectionism involved. There might be a few other things too. Number 6 is guilt and shame. And again, this is related to that self-judgment. If you're feeling guilt or shame, you probably are experiencing a tension between wanting to do a good job and provide something high quality and not really knowing what a realistic or helpful amount to do is for you in particular. That's where the guilt and the shame comes from. Guilt being I've done something wrong, and shame being I am wrong. That comes straight from Brene Brown, who I love. I feel like the gospel of Brene Brown. The difference between guilt and shame, perfect for highly sensitive people to tell that nuance and that difference. Number 7 is regret. If you find that you're experiencing a lot of regret, like a disproportionate amount of regret compared to what you're actually living through and experiencing, this could be a sign that there's some perfectionism at play, because it tells you that whatever you've done so far is not enough and you have to try it again. You have to do things differently, but you're not using it in the way of doing things differently to learn and improve. You're using it to punish yourself and to try and go back and fix the past, which has already been written. So if you're experiencing regrets, they might be related to some perfectionism. And the last one is insecurity. And I would also add imposter syndrome under that umbrella too, because perfectionism creates this idea that no matter what we do, it's not going to be good enough. And so we start to internalize this and we start to believe no matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough. No matter what I do, I'm not good enough. These underlying thoughts can be super tricky and super messy, and it's very easy for our brains to personalize things and make them about us. So a simple thought that could start out with, I have to get this right, might become something deeper, like, if this doesn't work, I'm wasting my time. If I waste my time, I'm a waste of time. I'm not good enough. You can usually trace your thoughts and your deepest fears down to that level where you're personalizing and making something mean something about you that may not necessarily be true. In fact, it's likely not true. So here's the solution. There are 3 things that you can do to break out of perfectionism. And this is really important, and it takes practice. This is not a glamorous quick fix pill that you can swallow and suddenly everything will get better and you're recovered from perfectionism. This is work, but it's worthwhile work. You can create high quality work by taking these actions to get out of perfectionism. So the first solution is to practice shifting your mindset from black and white thinking, where perfectionism lives. It's either perfect or everything else fails, everything else sucks, to a more nuanced view that we highly sensitive people are great at. This is what's important. This is what's not important. I'm prioritizing what's important. Going back to the story I was sharing with you about my completionism, I had this vision of myself as I was thinking about all these things I had to catch up on, that I was starting 3 steps behind. And what I really wanted to do was just start on the starting line. I wanted to start at square one. And I realized that putting myself 3 steps behind was just a choice. I don't have to catch up on anything. I could literally just take those 3 steps forward and start from square one on whatever I'm doing. So there is this idea of diminishing returns, that the longer you invest energy in something, the less that you're going to get the benefits out of it. This doesn't apply to everything, because there are some things like our relationships that we do want to continue to invest energy in long term. But this nuance refers to when you're pushing through something when it's no longer serving you, when you're going over the course materials again, even though you already understand it, when you're reading the same books again, when you're doing the same reflection questions again, even though you've already done them, even though you've already gotten something out of them. You're trying to push through and get more and more out of something that you've already tapped and you've already gotten value out of. So there's a threshold of effectiveness that once you reach it, you have to be able to pivot away, because it's no longer giving you huge benefits despite as much energy as you're putting into it. And for highly sensitive people who put a lot of energy into everything we do, not knowing where your threshold is, where you've completed what you need to complete and you still have all this stuff to do, that's going to drain your energy. And I don't want that for you. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can actually use your energy super efficiently and in your highest well-being by discerning when to stop pushing through on something. That brings us to number 2, which is decisiveness and discernment. Learning to be good at making decisions and making choices. And one of those big choices for you is to decide what enough is. How do you define enough for you, and what goes beyond enough? When you define those for yourself in advance, then it's a lot harder to fall for those temptations or move the goalposts on yourself because you've already determined this is what I want to do. This is already a high standard. Anything on top of that is just a bell and a whistle. And then the important thing is to be flexible enough with your choice that you can change your mind. Changing your mind doesn't mean that you're lazy. It doesn't mean you're running away. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means that you've made a decision, you've tried it out, and you decide whether it works for you or not. If it doesn't work, then you do the same thing. You choose something else and you try something else. So the first one is getting out of black and white thinking. The second one is practicing your decisiveness and your discernment, choosing what's most important for you. And the third one is taking action with an understanding that discomfort and mistakes and making lots of attempts that go nowhere are the process. You can't get the results that you want without the discomfort and without making the mistakes. Growth happens outside of your comfort zone. And progress is messy. That's why perfectionism is so antithetical to progress, because perfectionism is clean and clear and pure. It's not messy. That's why it keeps us stuck and why it keeps us miserable, because we're never willing to dig in and get our hands a little bit dirty to figure things out. However, when you can change your thinking to everything you try as an experiment and you're just testing your hypothesis, suddenly it makes it easier to start taking that action. Perfectionism, much like passion or purpose or your calling, is an idea that people have that they'll think about something and they'll figure something out, or they'll have an epiphany, it'll hit them over the head, and then they can start taking action. In actuality, the progress happens when you take the action, you do it with discernment, you give yourself some credit and some leeway for doing it messy, and then you go from there. So just to recap, the 4 signs that you are probably struggling with perfectionism are procrastination and avoidance. Number 2, busy work. Number 3, self-judgment, guilt, and shame. Number 4, blaming outside circumstances, whether that's things happening outside of you or relationships happening outside of you. There are 8 signs, emotions, that you are in the middle of perfectionism: dread, fear and anxiety, doubt, confusion, resentment, guilt or shame, regret, and insecurity. And there are 3 solutions to help you break out of perfectionism when you're recognizing these emotions and when you're recognizing these signals. Number 1 is to retrain your brain away from black and white thinking and to recognize nuances. Number 2 is to practice making decisions and trying out priorities and being willing to make mistakes and change your mind. And number 3 is to take action with an understanding that the process is supposed to be messy and uncomfortable and hard. And that's how you learn. That's all part of the process, and it's all going according to plan. In my upcoming episodes, I'm going to be talking about procrastination in more detail, people pleasing, overstimulation, and a number of other common issues and how to overcome them. I also have 2 workshops that are happening in the next couple of weeks. The first one is tomorrow, February 22nd, 2024. It's an in-person workshop called All About Highly Sensitive People. You can find that information on my website, stephanielynn.com/workshops and classes. And my second one is a webinar that is taking place online. So you can do it anywhere in the world. And that's on February 28th, 2024, called Thriving with High Sensitivity. And that's about how to turn your sensitivity from kryptonite into your superpower. If any of these things are resonating with you, and if you want to determine if you are having some trouble as a highly sensitive person with perfectionism, or maybe one of these other issues, please do a highly sensitive assessment call with me. It's a quick 30-minute call. It's totally free. But in that conversation, I'll be able to help you determine where you are with your high sensitivity, whether you're surviving, managing, or thriving, and what your biggest blocks are so that we can make a roadmap together on how to get what you want. If that sounds good to you, go to stephanielynn.com and book one of the many buttons that says book a call. I would love to talk to you. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Thanks for listening. If you're ready to take what you learned today to the next level, head over to stephanielynn, that's LINN.com, and book a consultation call to get started. I can't wait to see you there, my dear HSP.